In Mobile Legends, being able to counter your enemy's attacks with your defense items is a big deal. That can be the difference between winning and losing. So for today's video, we will talk about all the defense items and their uses. My name is Brian and this is Tech Gaming. Defense items are pieces of gear that will give you more durability in terms of magic resistance, physical armor, and health. Every defensive item has different use, but they all share the same purpose, to counter damage dealers. But there are different types of damage in the game. So to put it simply, if you have opponents that rely on their magic damage, then go for magic resistant items. If they rely on physical damage, then go for physical armor. That's the basic idea. Each item has different stats and has unique abilities. There are more than 20 defense items currently in the game. So let's start. First up, we have the most basic defense items. We have the Vitality Crystal. This will simply give you an additional 230 points of health. This will cost you 300 gold. Next is the Leather Jerkin. This will give you plus 18 points of physical defense. It will cost you 220 gold. The Magic Resist Cloak. This one will give an additional 18 points of magic defense. It costs 220 gold. Next, the Healing Necklace, which will give you plus 20 points of HP regeneration. This will cost you 140 gold. And lastly, for the basic defense item, the Hero's Ring. This will give you an additional 150 points of health and 5% of cooldown reduction. It will cost you 450 gold. Now let's talk about the upgraded defense items. First is the RS Belt. This item will give you plus 770 points of health. It costs 900 gold. To build this, you need just one Vitality Crystal. Next is the Silence Robe, which will give you an additional 540 points of health and 30 points of magic defense. This will cost you 1020 gold. For this, you need one Vitality Crystal and one Magic Resist Cloak. Next, the Molten Essence. This item will give you plus 540 points of health and as a passive, whenever there's an enemy nearby, they will be damaged by 1% of their max HP every second. This effect will also deal more damage to minions by 50%. This will cost you 870 gold. The recipe for this is just one Vitality Crystal. Next, the Black Ice Shield, which will give you an additional 400 points of mana, 22 points of physical defense, and 10% of cooldown reduction. So if you use tank heroes that have many active skills and need a lot of mana, you should go for this one. This will cost you 880 gold, and for the recipe, 1 Leather Jerkin and 1 Power Crystal. And lastly for this category, the Dreadnought Armor. This item will give you plus 40 points of physical defense, and it has a passive. For every normal attack from an enemy hero, their damage will be reduced by 4% for 2 seconds, which is stackable up to 3 times. Now let's talk about the advanced defense physical items. So for number 1, the Blade Armor. This item will give an additional 90 points of physical defense. And that's not the best part. This item has a passive that whenever an enemy attacks you with their normal attack, they will also be damaged by 25% of their physical damage. Take note that this passive will only activate for physical damage. This will cost you 160 gold, and the recipe for this are 3 Leather Jerkins. I suggest you to build this item if you have enemies that rely on their normal attacks. Number 2, the Queen Wings. This item is best for tank and fighter heroes. If you use Terisla or Tamus, this is the real deal. This will reduce the damage that you take from enemies by 50% and will give you plus 30% increase in lifesteal whenever your health is below 40%. This effect will last for 5 seconds and has a 50-second cooldown. It also gives you an additional 15 points of physical attack, 100 extra points of health, and a 10% cooldown reduction. This will cost you 2,250 gold, and the recipe for this is 1 RS Belt and 1 Iron Hunting Bow. Number 3, Thunder Belt. This will give you an additional 800 points of health, 30 points of mana regen, 10% of cooldown reduction, and 40 points of physical defense. These also have a passive that whenever you use a skill, your next normal attack will have an extra 2 damage, equivalent to 2% of your max HP. Nearby enemy units to your target will all take this damage, and will be slowed for 1.5 seconds. This effect has a 1.5 second cooldown. The Thunder Belt will cost you 2,290 gold. The recipe for this consists of 1 Leather Jerkin, 1 RS Belt, and 1 Azure Blade. Number 4, Brute Force Breastplate. This item is best if you use heroes that often use their normal attacks and skills. This has a passive that whenever you hit an enemy hero, you will gain an additional 3% of movement speed, 4% of magic resistance, and also 4% of physical armor. This effect lasts for 4 seconds and can stack up to 5 times. This also gives you an additional 770 points of health and 45 points of physical defense. It costs you 2,120 gold, and the recipe is 1 Leather Jerkin and 1 RS Belt. Number 5, CUIRASS. This will give you an additional 920 points of health, 54 points of physical defense, and 30 points of HP regeneration. This has a passive that whenever an enemy attacks your hero, their damage will be decreased by 6% for 2 seconds. And this effect can stack up to 3 times. This will cost you 2,170 gold, and the recipe for this is 1 RS belt and 1 dreadnought armor. Number 6, Dominance Eyes. This item will be a good match for those heroes that badly need a lot of mana. This will give you plus 500 points of mana, 70 points of physical defense, and 10% critical chance reduction. This is a good counter item for those heroes that have massive critical damage. And we're not done yet for this item. This item has a passive that will give you plus 10% of cooldown reduction. And also, this has an effect that lowers the movement speed and attack speed of nearby enemies by 10% and 30% respectively. This item will cost you 2,160 gold, and the recipe for this is 1 Black Eye Shield and 1 Dreadnought Armor. And lastly, for physical defense items is the Immortality. For me, this is the most important, if not one of the most important items in the game. This will give you an additional of 800 points of health and 40 points of physical defense. And the most interesting part is that you can be resurrected after dying. But take note that when you resurrect, your HP will only be 15% of your max HP. But the good news is that you have an extra shield that can absorb 300 to 1000 points of damage. But take note, this has a 180 second cooldown. So guys, don't forget to buy this one when you are in a crucial game. This item will cost you 2,120 gold, and the recipe for this is 1 RS belt and 1 leather jerkin. Now let's talk about magic defense items. So for number 1, the Cursed Helmet. This item is good for tanks that do a lot of crowd controlling. This has a passive that whenever you are near an enemy, they will be damaged by 1.5% of their max HP every second. The damage will also increase by 50% for the minions. This item also gives you an additional 1,200 points of health and 25 points of magic defense. It costs 1,830 gold, and the recipe for this is 1 Molten Essence and 1 Magic Resist Cloak. Number 2, the Oracle. This item will give you plus 850 points of health, 42 points of magic defense, and 10% cooldown reduction. This item also has a passive that will raise an absorption shield and regenerates your HP by 25%. It will cost you 2,110 gold, and the recipe for this is 1 Silence Robe and 1 Hero's Ring. And lastly for this category, Athena's Shield. This item is good for the early game up until the late game. It's best if you have a lot of enemies that rely on their burst magic damage. This will grant you a shield of health points that ranges from 170 to 1150. The shield will grow throughout the game. This item will also give you an additional 900 points of health, 62 points of magic defense, and 20 points of HP regeneration. It will cost you 2,050 gold, and the recipe for this is 1 Silence Robe and 1 RS Belt. And lastly for the advanced items are the ones that will give you a lot of health. First, the Twilight Armor. This item will give you plus 1,200 points of health, 400 points of mana, and 50 points of HP regeneration. This also has a passive effect. The damage that you take from a particular enemy will not exceed 900 points. So if you're up against Aldous in the late game, I highly suggest you build this item. It will cost you 2,260 gold, and the recipe for this is 1 Healing Necklace, 1 Power Crystal, and 1 RS Belt. And lastly is the Guardian Helmet. This item has a passive that regenerates your HP by 1.5% of your max health. This regeneration effect will increase after you buy this item and get a kill or assist, but it has a limit of up to 3.5% of regeneration, and the effect will wear off after you've been hit by an enemy. This item will also give you a massive 1,550 additional points of health and 100 points of HP regen. This will cost you 2,400 gold, and the recipe for this item is 2 RS belts and 1 healing necklace. And that's it. Guys, always remember that Mobile Legends is like a chess game where you have to counter your enemy's moves. Buying the right defense items in the right situation is just one example of this. I hope you learned a lot in this video, and if you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to our channel for more content, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any future uploads, and be sure to visit yugatech.com/gaming for more news, tips, and tricks. This has been Brian, and see you again in the next one.